Said no one ever. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Get social with TuneIn. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest and greatest audio on the app. Explore exclusive content. Learn about hot new podcasts and get alerted when the big game, well, it's about to begin. Add TuneIn to your feed and be in the know when it matters most.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
This is the TuneIn Newsreel with top news stories from today.
The Supreme Court will allow the families of the Sandy Hook massacre victims to sue Remington Arms for making the Bushmaster AR-15 style rifle. The lawsuit says it was too dangerous to have ever been sold to the public. Some Disney Plus customers were having a little trouble connecting this morning. In a first-day crunch of subscribers, the new streaming service costs a pretty low $7 a month.
I think the pricing is aggressive, and it sent shockwaves through the whole media thing when they came out with that price. But, look, they're investing for the long term. I think that's smart. They're going to get a massive base in there. And as we've seen Netflix raise prices, when they can, they'll raise prices.
New York Times media columnist James Stewart on CNBC.
Hear breaking news as it happens with live around-the-clock coverage from CNBC on TuneIn.
Hey, can't watch the big NBA game because your life's just too busy? I've got some news for you. TuneIn Premium is the answer to all your problems. Hear every home and away game live or on demand everywhere you go. Just search NBA to listen.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
And coming up on Bloomberg Business Week, we're going to talk a little bit about the private credit market, what it might tell us about the broader economy, about deal making, and a lot more. That's just ahead. But first, let's get back to Doug Krisner. He's got an update on the trade. Hey, Doug.
Hey, today's session is kind of lackluster. We were hoping for some clarity from President Trump on the U.S.-China trade deal and whether or not we're going to get a partial agreement. He was speaking earlier at the Economic Club of New York. He said a significant deal could happen soon. In the Q&A, he went on to say, if we don't make a deal, will raise tariffs significantly. The Dow right now is essentially flat, although within the industrial average, we're seeing weakness in shares of Dow. Stock is down about 2% right now. Tomorrow, Fed Chair Jay Powell will be on Capitol Hill testifying to Congress. So we'll try to get some insight into the direction of interest rates here in the States. Right now, the 10-year Treasury down about 2 basis points in yield. We're trading with 1.92% yield on the 10-year. The dollar, meantime, is higher for the first, check that, 6th time in 7 sessions. Right now with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index higher by 0.2%. The yen firm as well, 108.99. The offshore Chinese yuan, meantime, weaker by 0.1% at 7.0163. Shares in the drug maker AbbVie climbing 2%. The company has sold $30 billion in bonds to fund its purchase of Allergan. And Disney shares higher by more than 1%. The company is debuting that new streaming service today, Disney Plus. A few technical glitches earlier. At the same time, fair amount of buzz and excitement on social media. The new Star Wars series Mandalorian was trending earlier today. You're caught up on markets. Let's get back to Bloomberg Business Week.
Doug, thanks so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio.
So give some credit where it's due. Give props to you know who I gave you swagger.
All right, so there's a lot of talk about credit these days. Private credit, private equity seems like so yesterday. It's not, but private credit really coming on strong. Let's get into why. Michael Ewald back with us. He is the head of private credit up at Bain Capital, based in Boston, here in New York City with me today. Great to see you.
Good to see you as well, Jason.
You're not wearing a tie, which people on radio can't see. You're really a trendsetter. You sort of shamed me into not wearing a tie the last time, which I very much appreciate. So in the big bad world out there, the economy continues to sort of chug along. We heard from the president a little bit earlier here in New York City. What does the credit picture tell us about the world?
I think it's a great question. You know, at Bain Capital Credit, we're very bearish on the economy right now. We keep thinking that there is some sort of economic cycle down leg coming relatively soon here. So we've positioned our portfolios very defensively in terms of industries, in terms of being more senior in the capital structure. But what's interesting is what we observe on the street is things like there's wage pressure at some of our companies. And so you wouldn't expect to see wage pressure necessarily if we're, about to fall off a cliff economically. So we're still staying conservative, but we're not necessarily seeing any imminent signs of the economy falling off a cliff.
And so talk to me about the private credit market, because I feel like it's something that we throw around a lot, certainly here at Bloomberg. It's fast growing. What are we actually talking about here?
Another great question. So it used to be that direct lending and middle market meant the same thing, but I feel like those two terms have bifurcated now. So middle market lending is simply lending to smaller companies that can't access liquid securities effectively, or broadly syndicated bank loans, for example. Direct lending used to be just lending directly to those companies, but now direct lending has also come to mean disintermediating some of those larger syndication banks, and you're starting to see some private placements effectively becoming larger and larger in the marketplace.
And is it fair to say that this, and I think we talked about this last time you were with us, I mean, this is a business that has fundamentally changed over the last 10 or 12 years, in part because folks who are in the business, those big banks, just aren't in it to the extent that they were. And a lot of firms like yours have really stepped in and grown pretty tremendously in the meantime.
That's certainly true. And what we see, a lot of our business relates to private equity sponsor buyout back transactions. And sometimes there's a competitive angle on the private equity side of things. And so private equity sponsors need to move fast and try to win a deal quickly. One of the ways you can win a deal quickly is by having committed financing. And sometimes coming to one or two direct lenders, for example, is a lot quicker than going to a bank who then needs to syndicate that particular term loan out, for example.
All right. You just teed me up for my next question so beautifully. I appreciate it. Part of what we've been talking a lot about in the world of private equity, private credit, leveraged loans, et cetera, is this rumored deal, this mega buyout that could set all sorts of records. Is there the market appetite for a $60, $70 billion LBO at this point?
It would take a lot of lenders to actually pull that together, in my opinion. You're talking $40-50 billion of debt. Right. Despite all the money that's been raised in the space, for sure. That's been raised $1 billion, $2 billion at a time. Yeah. So if you want some diversity in those portfolios, obviously you can't write that big a check. So that'll definitely test a lot of things, I think, in the market today.
Right. And does that tell us something about the broader appetite for alternative assets in general, do you think? Because the investors on the equity side and the credit side seem to sort of be there to support these types of deals.
Well, I think we still need to figure out whether it is just KKR that's interested in that particular deal, right? Because it was pretty standard to have these club LBO deals that were pretty big, pre-crisis even. And I'm not sure to what extent one player is going to pull off a deal of that size, quite frankly, either on the equity side or the debt side. So it used to be a little more common, and it's been gone for 10, 12 years now. So we'll see if we're back
sort of
to that.
Clubbing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so when you think about investor appetite for your particular business, it seems to be robust. We had one of your, I think, competitors, Owl Rock Capital, sell a stake, valuation in the multiples of billions of dollars for the management company there. Clearly, institutional appetite is there. Do you see that waning at all?
No, for a simple reason, really, and that is yields are still low around the world, and obviously negative yields in parts of Asia, parts of Europe as well. The risk-free rate is pretty darn low right now. On the syndicated side, you can earn 3-4%, but if you want that, if you're okay keeping your money liquid, you can earn 100, 200, 300 basis point premium for that. And so we're seeing a lot of investor appetite, especially amongst the institutional side. It's almost like a fixed income replacement.
Right. Fed's your friend in this case, right?
Yes, exactly.
Right. And do you hear anything, just about 30 seconds left, do you hear anything from the Fed or from sort of policymakers that would make you doubt that we're going to be in this low yield environment for a while?
No, look, the only thing from a regulatory perspective that is interesting is LIBOR is going away, in another 18, 24 months or so. So I think there needs to be some work done around that, but I don't see anything that necessarily is going to impact the rate overall.
Great stuff. Michael Ewald is head of private credit for Bain Capital. He's based up in Boston, also an alum of the #2 business school overall, the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. According to Bloomberg Business Week last week, those rankings. You can check those out online as well. And check out this interview via podcast if you missed any of it or you just want to get even smarter about the private credit business. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Let's get over to Bob Moon. He's got some world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, look for tariffs on China to be boosted substantially if Beijing doesn't make the concessions necessary to reach a trade deal. That warning from President Trump today as he made a speech to the Economic Club of New York. At the same time, he returned to his oft-stated prediction that a significant Phase 1 deal could happen soon, putting the onus on China.
And I won't use this word cheated. I will not say the word cheated, but nobody's cheated better than China, but I will not say that.
Trump said China has been deceiving the world by portraying itself as a developing nation when it really is an economic superpower. The Supreme Court is hearing arguments today for and against the DACA program, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which has allowed about 800,000 children brought here illegally by their parents to remain in the U.S., something the Trump administration wants to come to an end. Representative Sylvia Garcia of Texas is hoping the high court rules in favor of the children, many of whom have grown to attend college, have jobs, or have joined the military.
We're here today to support you and all our dreamers, and defend your rights. Because dreamers are Americans, and they are here to stay because this is their country.
If justices uphold the administration's decision to end the program, those who were shielded by DACA for years could lose their work permits and become vulnerable to deportation. The nation's largest union of registered nurses, National Nurses United, says it will endorse Bernie Sanders at a California event on Friday. The 150,000-member union cites his support for Medicare for all, veterans' health care, and in boosting the labor movement. Global news 24 hours a day, on air, and a TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Bob Moon.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
This is the sound of festive fun in London. You want to keep your savings for the things you love this Christmas, not a new boiler. We're with you. So our boilers come with 2 years interest-free credit to keep your savings for a Merry Christmas. You'll get a 5-year British Gas warranty, and now we can quote by video call evenings or weekends. Get a quote by the 30th of November and get £150 off a new boiler, or £450 off for existing home care customers. Search British Gas New Boiler. Conditions apply.
This is a live message from the Survivalist Network. There are reports of an impending zombie apocalypse reaching London. But don't panic. Our intel shows that for £199 a month with 0% APR representative, you can locally access the Toyota Hilux Invincible, the only vehicle with the build strength to withstand savage hordes of the undead. Once inside your Toyota Hilux, stay on this frequency for updates. You'll be fine.
0% APR representative on new sales of Hilux Invincible over 42 months. £199 per month. Customer deposit of £9,701 when financed through Access Toyota by 16th of December 2019. £12,525 optional final payment. Subject to status to over 18s. Indemnities may be required. Conditions apply. Toyota Financial Services.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour. But we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Get social with TuneIn. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest and greatest audio on the app. Explore exclusive content. Learn about hot new podcasts and get alerted when the big game, well, it's about to begin. Add TuneIn to your feed and be in the know when it matters most.
What if you could keep up with cable news even when you're on the go? With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to MSNBC live without any commercial interruptions. All of the news, none of the ads. Listen live on TuneIn Premium today.
Cook got a block. Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
NFL fans, hear every live game on TuneIn Premium.
The snap. The give Jones up the middle. Runs it back. He's to the 10 to the 5 to the end zone. Touchdown.
This Thursday, hear the home and away call as the Pittsburgh Steelers visit the Cleveland Browns at 8:20 p.m. Eastern.
Get pressure again. Rolls to his right. Fakes. He's going to run with it. He's the 5. Touchdown.
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
At 47 past the hour, let's get you caught up on price action in equity trading right now. We are off session highs. That said, the S&P and the NASDAQ are extending records. The Dow, though, showing a little bit of weakness, down about a tenth of 1%. Markets had been hoping for some clarity from President Trump on a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. He was speaking earlier at the Economic Club of New York and said a significant deal could happen soon. In the Q&A, though, he said if we don't make a deal, we'll raise tariffs significantly. He also renewed his assault on the Fed, saying the central bank was hurting the U.S. by not copying other central banks in deploying negative interest rates. That sets us up well for tomorrow's testimony from Fed Chair Jay Powell. Right now, U.S. 10-year Treasury yielding 1.91%. So we're down more than 2 basis points in yield after a holiday yesterday for the bond market. Crude oil showing a bit of weakness. Citigroup and BNP Paribas among those who see Brent sliding to the low 50s. That's unless OPEC and Russia don't announce deeper production cuts. Right now we have Brent crude at $61.99 and New York crude, that would be WTI, $56.73. The private equity firm 3G Capital is among suitors, we are told, submitting bids for the elevator unit of Germany's ThyssenKrupp. We'll talk more about that as we continue on Bloomberg this week. You guys are caught up on markets. Back to you.
Doug, thanks so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio. All right, well, as of today, it's official. The mouse is in the streaming business. Disney Plus, a big launch today, highly anticipated to say the least. So let's talk about how it's going so far. Jeff Greenfield is here with me in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. He's the Chief Attribution Officer for C3 Metrics. And Geeta Ranganathan, Technology Media Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. She's on the phone from our BI headquarters down in Princeton, New Jersey. Jeff, I want to start with you. You and I were talking a little bit before we came on air here. Widely anticipated, so much content out there, but let's stick with Disney for the moment. What do you make of it? What do you make of it so far today?
People are overwhelmed. There's just there, and as we said earlier, there is so much content out there. But if you look in the news right now, you can even see that Disney is overwhelmed with the response. They had some issues starting up this morning. Of course, there's a question: did that actually really happen, or is that just another story for the press to make people feel like that they're overwhelmed? Right. But walking the streets of New York today, you can't not see Disney. There's outdoor. Every cab has Disney Plus. The whole idea is that if you have not subscribed to Disney Plus in one way, form, or another today or tomorrow, your kids are going to force you to do it. Yeah.
So, Geeta, come on in here. And as Jeff points out, like, my kids are all over me about this, trying to figure out what our streaming strategy is going to be. I've asked for a little bit more time. I don't know if they're going to give it to me or not. But what do you make of sort of the Disney launch? You did a great presentation last week at the year ahead, sort of teeing all this up. Now the day is here. What does it look like in real life?
So, yeah, I absolutely echo those comments. I think, there's been a lot of excitement building up for this service, and it's really justified, because if you just look at the catalog of content, they're really anchored by some very, very brands that are beloved across the world. The price point is extremely compelling. So from a viewer's perspective, I think they're really getting bang for the buck.
And so, Jeff, put it in the context of the rest of the streaming world. You know, we've been joking about the idea that we're sort of going to have to make all these decisions. But what is it about Disney that's going to make it competitive with Hulu? Also, could be part of the bundle, but sort of a competitor, because ultimately there's only so much time that we all have to consume all this. What's going to determine winners and losers, or do we know?
Well, I think we can step back and immediately say that Disney will be a massive winner. Disney has been in the content game for years. They're experts at this. They have an algorithm down. They know how to roll out content. They know how to roll it back. They know exactly what they're doing. They also have all of the major franchises. And as they've proven, they're not afraid to put their money where their mouth is in order to acquire more content. The big story here, though, is what's going to happen to everyone else that's here. And if you look at the other players in this space, you look at Amazon with Prime, and you really have to look at the complete stack. So Amazon really has the complete stack. They have a streaming service, they've got this shopping back end, and now they have a physical marketplace in Whole Foods and now in other shopping coming out. And if you look at Disney is very similar in that. But then if you go and you look at Netflix is just streaming. So what's happened over the course of just a few years is this incredible form of entertainment, which is streaming, is now just a feature of a larger business.
Right.
And it is going to be, even if Netflix all of a sudden turned on advertising, there would be no way that they could compete with Disney and the amount of content they currently have.
Right.
So what that means is that you're going to see some consolidation, because now all of a sudden you have Peacock coming out. There's more and more streamers that are coming out. It just makes us more competitive, and it's going to be impossible for them to compete. For Disney's going to be the winner.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
And so, Geeta, if you're looking at this, if you were sitting at a competitor right now, you see this rollout, what are you taking away from it, both in terms of execution, sort of day of, but also the strategy that seems to be underneath it?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a really well-orchestrated move by Disney. I mean, it's been so many years in the making, Jason. They had to acquire the technology with BAMTech. They had to acquire, I mean, they obviously have a fantastic library to begin with, but they went ahead and kind of added to that extensive catalog with an $80 billion purchase of Fox, integrating all of those assets. So, I mean, if you're not a Disney, if you're not a Netflix, it really is going to be hard to compete. The costs of content are escalating at a dramatic pace. I mean, just Netflix alone is spending about $15 billion this year, maybe $20 billion next year. And remember, Disney is also going to be losing money in the process. Yes, of course, they come out on top in terms of subscriber numbers, but it's going to be a while before they actually make money on the service.
Right. Well, and Jeff, it's such an interesting point that Geeta makes, and I hadn't really thought about it in this way, but they have bought this content. You know, Bob Iger has sort of bought this over the years. He's sort of amortizing his costs in some ways. You think about Star Wars, you think about Marvel, you think about even going all the way back to the Pixar acquisition, plus the recent Fox acquisition. Clearly, they're going to be spending money on new content, but that library is unbelievable.
Oh, it's absolutely incredible. And I mean, if you just go back a number of years ago, no one anticipated that people would buy DVDs and have them at home. And so that created a whole new stream of revenue. And now you've got this streaming. It's the gift that kind of keeps on giving for content producers. It just proves over and over again that it used to be about the tech itself here. When you think about the streaming technology, and what we're realizing is it's really about content. Content is king, but it's also the data that's behind that content.
Right.
Because once you have that content going, now there's a whole new stream of monetization, which is not the subscribers, but it's the advertising that can go along with that. And that's the piece that Netflix has said that they will never touch. But the reality is that even if they were to go into advertising, they still would not be able to play catch up in terms of the amount of content that Disney Plus is going to have.
Right. It's really going to be amazing to watch, and certainly a day that people look back on as an important one for Disney. Disney shares, we should say, are up about a little over 1% today. My thanks to Jeff Greenfield, Chief Attribution Officer for C3 Metrics, normally based up in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, here in New York City today. And Geeta Ranganathan, she is Technology and Media Analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining me on the phone from BI headquarters in Princeton, New Jersey. Well, coming up, Peggy Collins will be along. She was over at that speech by the President of the United States. She will bring us that and co-host with me for the rest of the show. We're going to talk about trade. We're going to talk a little sports. We're going to talk a little bit about Tesla as well. Get to the close of trading, too. So much ahead in the next couple hours of Bloomberg Business Week. You're listening to Bloomberg.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world.
Your eyes. We can't in real life. Brent Cross London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
This is a live message from the Survivalist Network. There are reports of an impending zombie apocalypse reaching London. But don't panic. Our intel shows that for £199 a month with 0% APR representative, you can locally access the Toyota Hilux Invincible, the only vehicle with the build strength to withstand savage hordes of the undead. Once inside your Toyota Hilux, stay on this frequency for updates. You'll be fine.
0% APR representative on new sales of Hilux Invincible over 42 months. £199 per month. Customer deposit of £9,701 when financed through Access Toyota by 16th of December 2019. £12,525 optional final payment. Subject to status to over 18s. Indemnities may be required. Conditions apply. Toyota Financial Services.
This is the sound of festive fun in London. You want to keep your savings for the things you love this Christmas, not a new boiler. We're with you. So our boilers come with 2 years interest-free credit to keep your savings for a Merry Christmas. You'll get a 5-year British Gas warranty, and now we can quote by video call evenings or weekends. Get a quote by the 30th of November and get £150 off a new boiler, or £450 off for existing home care customers. Search British Gas New Boiler. Conditions apply.
Hey, can't watch the big NBA game because your life's just too busy? I've got some news for you. TuneIn Premium is the answer to all your problems. Hear every home and away game live or on demand everywhere you go. Just search NBA to listen.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York, I'm Doug Krisner. It is now 3 p.m. on Wall Street, so we have an hour remaining in today's trading session. The equity market well off the best levels of the day. The Dow is now negative by about 0.2%, down from a record high. S&P 500 essentially flat. The NASDAQ composite holding on to a gain, very slim one at that, something in the vicinity of about 0.1%. Now, the markets had been hoping for clarity from President Trump on a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. He spoke earlier at the Economic Club of New York and said a significant deal could happen soon. Then in the Q&A, Trump said, if we don't make a deal, we'll raise tariffs significantly. He also renewed his assault on the Fed, saying it was hurting the U.S. by not copying other central banks and deploying negative interest rates. That sets us up very well for tomorrow's testimony from Fed Chair Jay Powell. U.S. 10-year Treasury back online after a holiday yesterday. We are down 3 basis points in yield to 1.91%. Shares in the drug maker AbbVie rising 1.8%. The company sold $30 billion in bonds today to fund the purchase of Allergan. We have news that top U.S. milk producer Dean Foods has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. At the same time, the company said it's in advanced talks with the Dairy Farmers of America about a potential sale. Shares in JetBlue Airways down by 2.3%. The carrier is revamping its fare categories for the first time since they were introduced back in 2015. The company said the changes will give it the tools to more aggressively drive fares lower. Disney higher by 1.2% right now. The company is debuting that new streaming service today, Disney Plus. There were some early technical glitches, but at the same time, buzz and excitement on social media. The new Star Wars series Mandalorian was trending. Private equity firm 3G Capital among the suitors submitting bids for the elevator unit of Germany's ThyssenKrupp. We are told the number of bids expected to be whittled down in the next few weeks. Dollar strength today with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index higher by 0.2%. I'm Doug Krisner. That's the Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, it's a banner day. I'm just going to say it. We're going to do some Business Week economics, and why not just have, the head of our economics coverage for Bloomberg News, normally based in Washington, kick it off with us. Peggy Collins is here. She's going to be with me for the next couple hours. Hi, Pegs.
Hi, Jason. It's so great to see you here in our New York office.
I know you're back home in New York. We, reluctantly sent you to Washington for this big job, but you're here because the president's here, because that's how you roll. We're going to talk about that in just a second, but first let's bring in our roundtable. Alex Harris, bond reporter for Bloomberg. She's here in New York City, as is Yelena Shalecheva, senior U.S. economist for Bloomberg Economics. So, Pegs, let me start with you just by asking you, what was it like in the room? President Donald Trump speaking for an hour plus to a pretty receptive crowd, it felt like.
That's right. I mean, it was packed, first off, and also, as you said, Jason, he really got a pretty warm reception. There was multiple times throughout the speech where people were laughing, he was making jokes, and there were multiple times where he got pretty significant claps, particularly around his comments saying that the White House administration had done a lot to help out on the deregulation front. That was one of the biggest applauses that he got. So it was also less of an economic and trade-focused speech than I was expecting and that we had sort of been angling or preparing for. He really went through a lot of different things. He certainly talked about his economic achievements and about trade, but he went through a litany of things that the administration had worked on. So it felt a little bit like a case to Wall Street of why you should reelect him.
Right. So, Yelena, come on in here, because what did you hear? You weren't in the room, were you?
I was not. I was listening here. Right. And again, I was also hoping that to hear something a little bit more instructive in terms of tariffs or what is going to happen. Unfortunately, he didn't break any new ground on that front, I don't think. And that was kind of the main conclusion for me. So it doesn't look as great as it was in the beginning when they talked about phase one trade deal, and we all saw breaking headlines. They kind of stepped back on that front, I think, and that was the conclusion for me.
Alex, what'd you hear?
Well, I was actually talking to Ira Harris, who's a longtime rates and FX trader who also happens to be my dad.
I was waiting for that disclosure.
He just happens to be.
Minor detail.
But, one of the things that he has coined in his years of trading is this idea that money is fascist. And it's basically this idea it's this idea that, as long as things are stable and capital is flowing in, that you'll accept anything in terms of political conditions. And and look at China, as long as they were delivering growth, they'll accept what system is given to them. And I think, my takeaway from the speech and after talking to him is that that's what that room felt like, is that money is fascist, and he wasn't going to do anything that was going to upset the money in that room. And you could see it in the way that the markets reacted. Very little change in equities, very little change in the bonds, no change in Fed funds futures and Fed expectations. Right. And so that's what that was, and I think, to Yelena's point and to Peggy's point, I think it was very much a toned-down campaign speech. Right. Again, making the case to the people as to why you should reelect him.
So tomorrow, shifting gears, back in Washington, Jay Powell on Capitol Hill. What's your team thinking about as we lead into that, Peggy?
So we're expecting that Powell will echo what he said when the Fed cut for the third time this year in October, that basically he's going to reiterate the message that, we think what we've done so far, the 3 cuts, has helped the economy, but we don't see a real need to do much more at this time unless we see a quote-unquote material reassessment or a material change in the data. We had a strong jobs report in October, which did solidify the Fed's case, so we are expecting him to sort of toe that line tomorrow.
Yelena, what are you expecting from Chair Powell?
President Trump didn't really make any headlines. I don't think Powell will make any headlines either tomorrow in terms of anything new, right? So I totally agree with Peggy that he'll repeat the same message. It seems like everybody on the FOMC, voters and non-voters alike, seem to have support the pause going forward. So they did cut rates at the last meeting, but nobody seems to be willing to keep on going. And that's the message that he will probably reiterate.
Right. And meanwhile, in the bond market, back open today.
Back open today.
Anything notable?
No, there's a bit of a catch-up trade. You had the AbbVie deal price, $30 billion, biggest deal this year. But I think the market was already priced because that news was out on Friday. So you're not getting much of any real movement off of that there because I believe the market was already priced to that last week. But the other thing is looking ahead to Powell, it'll be interesting to see if Powell brings up what happened in September.
Right.
Because I'm very curious to see if members of Congress, besides Elizabeth Warren, have questions about what happened and the Fed's response to the incident, the issues with liquidity and funding markets, and possibly this idea that debt is a problem and how much debt they're issuing is one side of this coin.
How many more looks at sort of policy data? What are the important things that we're going to hear between now and, say, Thanksgiving, Yelena?
Well, we'll get another round of important data. We'll get payrolls, but not until Thanksgiving. We'll get one more before the FOMC meeting, right? So I think what's really key to watch is retail sales this Friday and how holiday shopping is shaping up, and Q4 as a whole as well. So because again, let's say it again, consumer is the key driver of economic growth, and that's what will drive their policy.
Don't forget that the continuing resolution for keeping the government open and funded expires on November 21st.
Yes,
so that's going to be something. And as we wrote about last week, that this could very much, if the Fed is so data dependent right now, and Powell also sees a lot of the issues with trade from this year in that first quarter data, if we get any hang up there, that obviously clouds things a bit.
Absolutely. Great point. All right. Alex Harris, bond reporter for Bloomberg, here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, and Yelena Shalacheva, senior U.S. economist for Bloomberg Economics. Thank you both so much. Peggy Collins, you're stuck with me, babe. You're here for the rest of the show. We're going to revisit a lot of things we've been talking about. Also talk a little sports, talk a little bonds, talk a little closing bell. So much more. First, let's get to Bob Moon. He's got your world national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, declaring that his administration has exceeded expectations, President Trump claimed credit today for the creation of 7 million jobs, although only 6.25 million have been created since he's been in office. Trump also suggested that Americans will likely have to vote for him because the challengers running against him are all, as he put it, crazy. He said his administration can do even more than it already has.
If we take back the House 2020 and retain the Senate and the White House, you will see things that even this room, and you've experienced a lot of great times over the last 2.5 years, but even you will be surprised to see.
Trump spoke to the Economic Club of New York in the same Midtown Manhattan ballroom where he celebrated his election to the White House in 2016. The Supreme Court was packed this morning as the nation's highest judicial authority considered the legal fate of Dreamers, Americans brought to the U.S. as children, now covered under the DACA program. They were given legal status by President Obama, but President Trump moved to terminate the plan a little over 2 years ago, and the Supreme Court is now deciding whether he can legally do so. California Congresswoman Nanette Berrigan of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus told reporters to remember this story is about real human beings.
This is about people. This is about lives. And this administration is making this about politics.
During arguments today, liberal justices emphasized the large number of individuals, businesses, and others that have relied on the program. Global news 24 hours a day, on air, and at TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Bob Moon.
Full breakfast, cup of coffee, whatever you have in the morning, have it at daybreak.
What's the outlook for the pound if there is another election?
Nathan Hager.
The U.S. could still delay those tariffs?
And Karen Moscow.
It is the fifth major industry player to make some sort of zero commission offer.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
Bloomberg has more from Hong Kong.
Weekdays at 5 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
My name is Hunter Hayes. I know myself, and I know my buzzed warning signs.
One shot is about knowing my limits or not necessarily knowing my limits.
I start with one shot to have a good time.
One of the signs that I'm starting to feel a little buzz is when I start solving not only my own problems, but the entire world's problems. When I know I'm going out, I know I'm going to start with calling for a ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
Are you in? If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Far wing, elevates, triple bucket.
The war of the crowd. The shot clock ticks down. Will the ball go in? The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. And the replays just don't cut
the
it.
Sideline, the man fleet for three.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season streaming live, so you can be there when it matters most. Hear it now. Hear it live on TuneIn.
Pump fake in the lane, turnaround jumper from 8 feet is good on the
Search
right block.
NBA Today to start listening.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
This is the TuneIn Newsreel with top news stories from today.
The new streaming service Disney Plus launched earlier than planned today, but within a few hours, some users were complaining on Twitter about glitches. Those who were able to access the service were giving rave reviews, while Disney shares are up more than 1%. The maker of Red Hook, Kona, and Omission Beers, Craft Brew Alliance, is being sold to Anheuser-Busch InBev.
Hear breaking news as it happens with live around-the-clock coverage from Fox News on TuneIn.
Stuck in traffic during the big game? With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to your favorite NFL team on the go. No TV required. Even during rush hour, you won't miss a single touchdown. Listen to the NFL on TuneIn Premium today.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marshawn scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Couldn't. Here's a swing and a drive deep to right field. Looking up. Goodbye, baseball.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off homers, follow TuneIn on social media to discover the latest and greatest in live sports.
With the 24th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft.
From live reminders that the biggest MLB games are on the air, to recommendations of the best new sports talk shows and podcasts.
He's going to be fine. He's going to be good right away in 3 years.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
In the dictionary, a podcast is this: a digital audio file made available on the internet, typically as a series, of which new installments can be received by subscribers automatically. But on TuneIn, a podcast is this.
I'm Adam Grant, and this is Work Life, my podcast with Ted. I study how to make work not suck.
And it's defined like this.
Blackout is a suspense-filled thriller from Endeavor Audio and Q-Code.
From news, sports, to pop culture, comedy, and beyond. Define your own podcast possibilities on TuneIn.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So we've got about 43 minutes now until the closing bell for the Tuesday session. Equities trading mixed right now. Off session highs and off some records as well. Want to get you the latest? Let's get over to the Bloomberg Macro Squawk Desk and Bill Maloney. Hey, Bill.
Hey, Doug, and thanks. Stocks quiet again today. The Dow is currently down 32 points. S&Ps are a little changed, and NASDAQ is higher by 6. The U.S. 10-year yield at 1.91%. Small caps are a little changed, and 6 of the main 11 SB sectors are also trading higher, led by gains in healthcare and utilities. Energy led to the downside. Nasdaq Biotechs rise 10 points. Transports fall 82. Semis are also a little changed, and the VIX is higher by 2%. Leaders to the upside in the Dow, Disney, Merck, and Home Depot, while Dow Inc. and ExxonMobil led to the downside. After earnings, Rockwell Automation rose 10%, while Advanced Auto Parts fell 7.6%, and CBS dropped 3.3%. In deal news, Burger King owner 3G is said to bid for ThyssenKrupp elevators. And wrapping things up, some of the names pointing after the bell tonight include ADT, Skyworks, and Tilray. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Doug?
All right, Bill, we've got dollar strength today with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index higher by 0.2%. A stable yen and a much weaker offshore Chinese yuan here at 7.0079 against the dollar. You're caught up on markets. Let's get back to Bloomberg Business Week.
Doug, thanks so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio. All right, so we were talking a little bit about this when we wrapped up our coverage of President Trump and looked ahead to tomorrow and Jay Powell testifying on Capitol Hill. Peggy Collins here with me. So we decided that we should have someone who works with her down in Washington round this out for us. Chris Condon, Federal Reserve reporter for Bloomberg. He's in our 99.1 studio down in our nation's capital, talking about his story. The Fed likely to defy history with rates steady through next year's election. Hello, Christopher.
Hello, Jason. How are you?
Good. I've got your boss here, so, mind your P's and Q's.
I'll try my best.
Hey, Chris.
So tell us what's going on here, because as you say, and we certainly live in a world where nothing really goes the way history would necessarily set it up to. But what are we expecting here from the Fed as we get into 2020?
Well, based on what we've heard from the Fed, from multiple policymakers, it really looks like they're on hold, and not just for a meeting or two, but probably well into 2020, if not all the way through until after the election. And we pointed out in that piece that you mentioned that, conventional wisdom is tempted to say, well, the Fed, they probably like to always avoid making moves in an election year. But that has not been the case. If you look back over the years, in fact, we looked over the last 10 presidential election years, and in pretty much every single one, the Fed has taken some monetary policy action, usually raising or lowering interest rates. In 2012, it was QE3. Now, in 2016, they didn't hike rates until after the election. But nonetheless, the point is clear. History shows that they've never been really shy about doing whatever they thought they needed to do, election year or no.
And Chris, this is pretty amazing because we're going into this context of an election year after a year where the Fed has really been pounded by the Trump administration. So do you think in some ways they may get some pushback for not moving next year, or how do you think that will be received?
I think no matter what, they're going to get a lot of pressure from this White House. The die has been cast with this president. He's going to hammer the Fed no matter what. Now, they have put out some pretty clear markers in December at his press conference. Powell made clear that they've now, in the October press conference, they've cut rates 3 times in a row now. That provides some insurance against a downturn that they don't really see coming, but it's a sort of just-in-case risk management strategy. And that's enough. And they're not going to move further in either direction unless something really drastic changes with the economy. Powell used the words material change. That's a clear sign that it's going to be hard for them to be moved in either direction.
So what do you think the Fed will be mostly looking for now in terms of signs for how their 3 cuts so far are working? In terms of, I mean, we haven't talked about it over this past year, but could there be a case for actually going in the other direction and hiking in 2020?
That could. Theoretically, yes, but I think the bar is even higher on the hiking side. It's high, as he said before they would cut again, but even higher. They'd have to see a real persistent and strong move in inflation data, realized inflation data, to make them think about raising rates again. In fact, they're trying, I think, to signal that the balance of risks for them, even though they don't put that line in their statement anymore, the balance of risk for them is ever so slightly just still tilted to the downside. They don't want the market to start pricing in a rate hike and start moving financial conditions upward. They're trying to steer clear of that. So still, tilting it a little bit to the downside. Now on the downside, I think what you're going to have to see before they would start to entertain another cut is a real deterioration of consumer spending. And that probably is not going to happen unless you see the jobs numbers deteriorate in a much more drastic fashion. They're expected to be, slowly coming down. But unless there's a real move and we see some layoffs, the consumer still looks in pretty darn good shape. And that's pushing the economy along fairly well.
Right. Certainly seems that way. All right. Chris Condon, always good to catch up with you. Fed reporter for Bloomberg down in our 99.1 studio in Washington, D.C. Peggy Collins' adopted hometown. This is her real hometown. I know it's not your real hometown, but we consider it such. So what do you make of Powell tomorrow?
I think he's a steady-as-you-go type person in general from the reporting that we've seen that people like Chris have done so well for Business Week and our other outlets. So I think you'll see more of that tomorrow. But we have seen interesting things pop up when he testifies before the House, and as he will tomorrow, the Joint Economic Committee. One of the things we expect could come up again, which was a really big focus for the last hearing, surprisingly so for some of it, was Libra. What's going to happen with a digital currency, and will the central bank get more involved in that?
Well, that's such an interesting point, and with all the things on Congress's mind right now, you do wonder what maybe some of those surprise questions he may get. Those Fed press conferences tend to be pretty straight ahead, but lawmakers, you never know what they're going to say. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly, Peggy Collins, you're on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Stocks are off their session highs in the final hour. Trade questions continue to hold the market back after a midday speech by President Trump failed to answer many questions about trade talks with China. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 18, the S&P 500 up 1, the Nasdaq Composite is up 11. In his speech, the president renewed his assault on the Fed, saying it's hurting the U.S. by not following other central banks and deploying negative interest rates. The president has sought to shift blame for slowing U.S. growth onto the Fed and away from his trade war with China.
Facelifts are going out at Juul Labs. The e-cigarette company is eliminating 650 jobs and freezing hiring. It's part of a plan to cut $1 billion in costs. It was a strong third quarter for home builder D.R. Horton. Orders rose 14% from a year ago, nearly double what analysts expected, thanks to lower mortgage rates. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
In the dictionary, a podcast is this: a digital audio file made available on the internet, typically as a series, of which new installments can be received by subscribers automatically. But on TuneIn, a podcast is this.
I'm Rachel Martin with David Green, and this is Up First from NPR News.
And it's defined like this.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show.
From news, sports, to pop culture, comedy, and beyond. Define your own podcast possibilities on TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Cook got a block. Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
NFL fans, hear every live game on TuneIn Premium.
The snap, the give, Jones up the middle, runs it back. He's to the 10, to the 5, to the end zone, touchdown.
This Thursday, hear the home and away call as the Pittsburgh Steelers visit the Cleveland Browns at 8:20 p.m. Eastern.
Get pressure again, rolls to his right. He's going to run with it. He's a 5. Touchdown.
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
In the stock market and in life, everything can change from 1 minute to the next. Be the first to hear the latest money news and market trends with CNBC on TuneIn. Wherever your day takes you, listen to CNBC's full slate of programming, including shows like Fast Money, Squawk Box, and Mad Money with Jim Cramer. And when the next big business story breaks, CNBC lets you know with live updates and commentary. At the office, at home, or on the go. Search CNBC on TuneIn to listen.
Far wing, elevates, triple bucket.
The war of the crowd. The shot clock ticks down. Will the ball go in? The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. And the replays just don't cut it.
To the sideline, the man bleeds for 3.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season streaming live, so you can be there when it matters most. Hear it now, hear it live on TuneIn.
Pump fake in the lane, turnaround jumper from 8 feet is good on the
Search
right block.
NBA Today to start listening.
Along the goal line, scores and takes it home.
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores.
And you can hear Hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move, and a shot,
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York, Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960 to the country, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
And you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly alongside Peggy Collins here on a Tuesday afternoon. Coming up, we're going to talk a little bit about the bond market and specifically a bond sale for some M&A. Also get Dave Wilson's chart of the day. First, Doug Krisner's got a check on the trade. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Jason. We've only got about 28 minutes left to go in today's session. NASDAQ is holding on to a record. This is the composite index, up about 0.2% now. But the Dow down 0.1%, and the S&P 500, while it's holding on to a gain of about 0.1%, it is off from a record high. So the markets had been hoping early in the day for a bit of clarity when it comes to the U.S.-China trade war. President Trump in town speaking earlier at the Economic Club of New York, and he was talking about partial trade deal. A significant deal could happen soon, he said, but then during the Q&A portion of his appearance, he said, if we don't make a deal, we'll raise tariffs significantly. And then he renewed his assault on the Fed, saying that the Fed was hurting the U.S. by not copying other central banks and deploying negative interest rates. Tomorrow, we'll hear from Fed Chair Jay Powell on Capitol Hill. 10-year Treasury right now with a yield of 1.91%, so we are down on the day by more than 2 basis points after a holiday yesterday. The private equity firm 3G Capital is among suitors who have submitted bids for the elevator unit of Germany's ThyssenKrupp. We are told the number of bids is expected to be whittled down in a few weeks. 3G's interest kind of comes as a surprise because the firm is more known for buying consumer companies. We've got dollar strength with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index rising for the 6th time in about 7 sessions right now with a gain of about 0.2%. You guys are caught up on markets. Let's get back to Bloomberg Business Week.
Doug, thanks a lot. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week here on Bloomberg Radio. Dave Wilson taking us back. Is that the Birds or something?
You win the prize, Jason Kelly. Congratulations.
Look at me.
I didn't think you were getting that one, to be honest.
Here I come. I surprise you every now and again, Dave.
Absolutely. And it's all about going back to stock buybacks. And it's something that comes out of a comparison of exchange-traded funds. I saw somebody do this on the internet. Dana Lyons, who was a fund manager and runs a newsletter and whatnot. And what he did is compare, buybacks. There's an exchange-traded fund called the Invesco Buyback Achievers ETF, and they invest in companies that have repurchased at least 5% of their stock in the past 12 months. He actually highlighted that particular ETF on Twitter late last week. And, over the 1 month period that ended Friday, it was up 11%. Now, we've seen this movie before, just not lately, because it's been more focused on dividends. And indeed, there is an Invesco Dividend Achievers ETF. So what the chart does is look at a year-to-date comparison. Now, this buyback ETF has really taken off. The dividend ETF is just kind of sitting there. It's up a little bit, something like 3%, but it is not keeping pace. And it's interesting to see that sort of shift, because let's face it, how often have we talked about investors wanting dividend income, right. The bond proxies, utilities, and real estate stocks being in vogue? That seems to have been turned on its head lately, and it's evident when you look at these two ETFs relative to each other, because you're going to have some way of kind of getting at, the companies that are buying back shares. Is it paying off for them? I mean, over time it has. This year, not so much in relative terms until about the past month when things started moving around in markets. If you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
Dave Wilson, thank you so much. We'll see you in just a bit for your stock of the day. Let's turn our attention now to a big bond sale, a mega bond sale, you might say. Molly Smith, corporate finance reporter for Bloomberg. She's here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio alongside Peggy Collins and myself. So, Mal, what's going on? This is a big, big deal.
It's only the largest this year, Jason.
Yeah.
Only the fourth largest of all time. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of bonds today.
You have high standards,
Molly. Oh, come on. I mean, just got to throw out some stats there for our listeners. And if you hadn't seen so far, this is the one from AbbVie, the pharmaceutical company financing its acquisition of Allergan today. So $30 billion is what the total comes to, what they're looking to borrow today. And yeah, like we said, largest this year.
And in healthcare, is it rare, or is this one of the biggest healthcare deals, or has it been a hot spot?
We've seen a lot of healthcare M&A in the past couple of years. I mean, the ones that come to mind, CVS Aetna, which was actually a bigger bond sale than this, Cigna, Express Scripts, a little smaller than this, but also up there. It's really just more speaking to the broader M&A space and how we've seen so much acquisition financing over the last 5, 10, however many years you want to call it.
All right, so Peggy Collins knows this well. Molly, you know it as well. When I see anything around financing, my mind immediately goes to private equity. And at the moment, my mind is going to
Walgreens?
This Walgreens, potential Walgreens deal. KKR making
Molly's reading you,
an offer. I know. And so this does make me wonder, is the financing available for a deal that big? What do you think?
That's something we've been talking about, too, and there's no way that it could all be done in high-yield bonds,
Sure.
which you generally would see in a leverage buyout. I mean, the largest ever high-yield bond is like, I don't know, I can't imagine it'd be much more than $10 billion for reference. And versus investment grade, largest we've ever seen is $49 billion. So big difference in terms of the market size. So you'd have to assume that some of Walgreens would have to come with an investment grade component, similar to what T-Mobile is likely going to be doing for Sprint once they get approval. Haven't seen the terms on Walgreens come out yet, but you'd have to imagine there's got to be some kind of an investment grade component to that.
I mean, what's interesting is I caught up with Peter Gleisten earlier from AGL. He's got this new CLO business with Tom Lee, who essentially invented the private equity business. And I put it to him, I said, is the financing available for a deal this size across the spectrum? He didn't miss a beat. He said, absolutely. He said, absolutely, it's out there.
I mean, if you look at the way
Not
deals
in junk,
are,
obviously, but as you say, this combination.
Right, and you would think also that this is going to be pretty higher quality, high yield too. Like if this is coming in double Bs, the demand is for sure there. This is like Walgreens right now is an investment grade company, so you definitely wouldn't see. I would imagine nothing lower than a double B for the high yield financing, but that's where things start to get a little dicier right now in terms of is funding available across the credit spectrum right now, and down in like the single B, triple C, lower quality parts of high yield, that's where you're seeing more of the stress.
Interesting.
Well, and as you write in your story, Molly, some of this is driven by the lower rates. They're getting lower, but also, as you know, Jason, private equity is sitting on a ton of cash to want to deploy.
And what that mix of equity and debt will be ultimately will also help drive this. All right, Molly Smith, always good to catch up with you. Corporate finance reporter for Bloomberg, tennis player and fan extraordinaire as well here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Let's get back over to Bob Moon. He's got your world national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, Wall Street didn't get the clarity investors were hoping for as President Trump failed to offer anything new on prospects of a trade deal with China. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports Trump repeated his now familiar boilerplate language.
The speech was widely anticipated for a progress report on the China negotiations.
They are dying to make a deal. We're the ones that are deciding whether or not we want to make a deal. We're close. If we don't make a deal, we're going to substantially raise those tariffs. They're going to be raised very substantially.
The president said the tariffs had produced China's worst economic setback in 57 years, while the U.S. economy is thriving. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
The Supreme Court's conservative majority seems prepared to allow the Trump administration to end a program that allows some immigrants to work legally in the U.S. and protects them from deportation. There did not appear to be any support among the 5 conservatives in extended arguments for blocking the administration's decision to wind down the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, or DACA. It currently protects 660,000 immigrants who came to the U.S. as children and are here illegally. Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Brett Kavanaugh were among the justices who indicated that the administration has provided sufficient reason for wanting to do away with the program. Snow and cold records falling from the plains to the Great Lakes and beyond as an Arctic air mass that started in Siberia spilled over a big chunk of the eastern half of the U.S., including the normally mild South today. The mid-autumn taste of winter brought record single-digit temperatures to Chicago and environs and snowfall in Memphis, Tennessee. Global News, I'm Bob Moon.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's environment of market volatility, Pershing's Prime Services is well positioned to support the needs of hedge funds and other alternative investment managers. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, platform access, or business expansion, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and agile enough to meet your evolving demands. Pershing helps to solve the needs of clients by advocating for them, providing unwavering strength, deep supply, and award-winning service that is at the core of everything we do. Find out what sets Pershing's prime brokerage team apart.
Learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers offered by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Visit our website at Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com.
The world is a noisy place, but whether I'm here or here, my phone calls are always loud and clear on my Doro 6620. Hi, love. Yes, I can hear you perfectly. I'm 10 minutes away. Get your Doro 6620 from Amazon, Tesco, and O2 today.
The 1304 LNER train, Coach C. Taking aunties with cold hands to nephews with warm cheeks in Edinburgh. Remorseful revellers back to their beds in Leeds. Business mums gliding over the Forth Bridge towards a door in toddlers in Newcastle. And a band heading to London to our group of strangers in a tiny pub. This is us. These are our journeys. This is our LNER.
Hiya. Oh, give me one of your chicken selects.
No.
Please, I've done my backing again.
You seem totally fine when you walk.
And my boyfriend split up with me. Came home to find him with my sister.
Didn't know you had a sister. Is there anything I can do?
One of your chicken selects will cheer me up.
Tender chicken breast strips seasoned with a crispy coating. Chicken selects from McDonald's. Get your own.
Come on, please give me one.
Served after 10:30 a.m., except in selected restaurants, which will serve this from 11 a.m.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
The swagger of a perfect dunk. The rush of a three made from all the way downtown. The adrenaline surge of great defense. Can you feel the goosebumps yet? There's nothing like live NBA and nothing like listening live on TuneIn.
Giannis down the lane to the rim, throwing right corner three. Another one.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season, so you can be there when it matters most. Never miss the action as it happens. Hear the ball you love. Hear it live on TuneIn. Search NBA today to start listening.
Couldn't. Here's a swing and a drive deep to right field. Looking up. Goodbye, baseball.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off homers, follow TuneIn on social media to discover the latest and greatest in live sports.
With the 24th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft.
From live reminders that the biggest MLB games are on the air, to recommendations of the best new sports talk shows and podcasts.
He's going to be fine. He's going to be good right away in 3 years.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
In the dictionary, a podcast is this: a digital audio file made available on the internet, typically as a series, of which new installments can be received by subscribers automatically. But on TuneIn, a podcast is this.
I'm Adam Grant, and this is Work Life, my podcast with Ted. I study how to make work not suck.
And it's defined like this.
Blackout is a suspense-filled thriller from Endeavor Audio and Q-Code.
From news, sports, to pop culture, comedy, and beyond, define your own podcast possibilities on TuneIn.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Making our way to the closing bell. We're about 13 minutes away right now. Equity market is trading mixed. We have the Dow down about 0.1%, but the NASDAQ composite is extending a record with a gain of about 0.2%. The day began with a little bit of hope for clarity from President Trump on a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. He was speaking earlier at the Economic Club of New York, and he said a significant deal could happen soon, although in the Q&A session, he said if we don't make a deal, we'll raise tariffs significantly. He also renewed his assault on the Fed, saying the central bank was hurting the U.S. by not copying other central banks in deploying negative interest rates. Tomorrow, we will hear from Fed Chair Jay Powell. In the broader market right now, S&P 500 is holding on to a gain, a slim one at that, by about 0.1%. We're seeing relative strength today in some of the healthcare names, also material stocks pushing higher, as are communication shares. That said, CBS Corp is down more than 3.5% after reporting a drop in profit. The company invested more in original programming for its streaming services, including a new deal for the Champions League soccer tournament. By the way, this is the final report for CBS before it merges with Viacom. In the bond market, U.S. 10-year Treasury right now with a yield of 1.91%. I'm Doug Krisner. That is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I don't want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, it is time for the Drive to the Close. JJ Kinahan is back with us. He is the chief market strategist over at TD Ameritrade. They look after $1.3 trillion. He joins us on the phone from Chicago, where I'm guessing it is as cold or colder than it is here in frigid New York City. JJ, this is the life we've chosen, you know?
You're having a heat wave compared to us. It's 7 degrees this morning when I woke up.
Oh, good Lord. God bless you. You're here with Peggy Collins and myself. So let's jump right in, because we could talk about the contours of the market. We can do that all day long. But I want to talk to you about Walgreens, because Peggy and I go back a ways. We looked after investing together here at Bloomberg for a long time. We love LBOs. We love big private equity deals. What do you make of that deal in particular, that proposed deal or that potential deal that Walgreens could be taken private?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Obviously a Chicago-based company, actually, speaking of Chicago. The thing about Walgreens is there's a lot of complexities to this one, from what I understand, more so than perhaps some other deals. First of all, it's a very, very big company. And so to find the financing, because they've already had to accumulate a little bit of debt over the years in order to finance opening up. They're still, as you guys know, a big believer in brick and mortar. And their brick and mortar sites do very well, but that takes money to run, so they've had to do that. So now, to go back private is going to take a lot of money, and given that model, given the competitors, it'll be interesting to see who sort of wants to step up to be involved with that.
What do you think in general of the drug makers and healthcare industry? We have a lot of the candidates on the Democratic side. They're talking a lot about structural big changes to the healthcare system. What are you thinking in terms of the markets and how that's playing in, if at all?
I think that's been the biggest surprise sector for most of us this year, and the strength that they've shown. And you see a few of them actually, United Healthcare comes to mind immediately, coming out and saying, we're raising expectations for 2020. Exactly to your point, Peggy. I think that's what's been very surprising, is that you're going into an election year where we can't get both sides of the house to agree on almost anything. But the one thing they all seem to agree on in every plank I see is healthcare is too high. We have to do something to rein it in. And so you would think that may affect the revenues of some of these healthcare companies, yet quite the opposite seems to be happening, that they're saying, we think that things look great for 2020. So from that point of view, it's really been a big surprise, and I think probably an area that most people have underweighted, because it's the one that seems to be a little bit, quote unquote, the scariest in terms of what can happen there from legislation that you can't really control.
We're talking with JJ Kinahan. He is Chief Market Strategist out at TD Ameritrade in Chicago. JJ, talk to me about Boeing, because this is a story I have to say I'm fascinated by. I mentioned this on yesterday's show. I listened to a great podcast by Bethany McLean, speaking of Chicago, over the weekend. Pride of Chicago there. She was talking with Peter Robeson, who works with us here at Bloomberg, about that story, the twists and turns. What do you make of Boeing? It's so important given its weight in the Dow right now, or then the Dow forever. It's an important stock. How do you look at it?
I think it's one that for, many of your listeners who are retail traders, it's a company you have to be very careful going in. First of all, $363, it's got a big price tag in terms of just pure dollar amounts for many people's accounts. But the second thing is, if you're going to go in here, you have to be aware that volatility is going, when it takes the stock down, it's going to take it down in a hurry. It's on a nice little run here. It seems to constantly get support at the 320 level. We've seen that a couple of times in the last few months, but this is the ultimate stock in going up the stairs and going down out the window. When the news comes out, it moves down very, very quickly. To your point, it's very important. They still have a great business model, but this is a story that will probably go on longer than anybody thinks. I know right now there's a January timetable for maybe that those planes getting back up in the air on a Maxes, but who's to know? And at the moment, it seems to be stuck in a little bit of a range between 320 and 380. And to be honest with you, if I'm long this stock, I'd actually be happy to see the stock stuck in a range for a little while, because there's been bad news that seems to be the thing that constantly affects them. Overall, great company, great stock, but whenever you have a news story pending over a company, or an audit pending over a company, or something like that, you're taking an extra level of risk that stock can move down very, very quickly without you being able to do much about that. So the other end of that is, if you're going to buy this stock, you better be wanting to take extra level of profits, because you are taking an extra level of risk.
Right.
JJ, when I think of Boeing from where we sit in D.C. on the economy team, we think of how big of an impact it actually has on jobs, manufacturing, industrial production. So broadening out a little bit, what's your take on this market between now and the end of the year? Can the consumer really hold up? Are you bullish on the economy, and therefore that will drive the markets through year end?
Yeah, I am bullish through year-end on the consumer, and a couple of reasons why. Number one, the spending's been amazing. Number two, you're coming into a time of year where, sadly, people tend to overspend. So we'll see if there's a little bit of reckoning once the calendar turns on that front. But the other end is I look back even to the employment report that just came out, and one of the things that was in there that I think didn't get talked about enough was the third area of jobs that were created was in financial services. But it was what was underneath that. The area of financial services where they were created was actually having to do with housing, so mortgages, closings, etc. When you're starting to create a lot of jobs there, we know the housing numbers have been pretty good. That's a real sign of faith in the economy and of people having faith in their jobs. So longer term, I think that was one of the more positive signs I've seen in a while.
Right.
So that's what actually keeps me bullish for a little bit.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Always great to catch up with you. Love talking names with JJ Kinahan. He is Chief Market Strategist for TD Ameritrade, joining us on the phone from even chillier Chicago. Well, coming up, we're going to get you to the close of trading. We're essentially flat on the Dow, S&P, NASDAQ, up just a touch. We'll bring you all of those numbers, some stocks to watch, and much more. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly, Peggy Collins, here on Bloomberg.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Get social with TuneIn. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest and greatest audio on the app. Explore exclusive content. Learn about hot new podcasts and get alerted when the big game, well, it's about to begin. Add TuneIn to your feed and be in the know when it matters most. The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Hey, can't watch the big NBA game because your life's just too busy? I've got some news for you. TuneIn Premium is the answer to all your problems. Hear every home and away game live or on demand everywhere you go. Just search NBA to listen.
In the stock market and in life, everything can change from 1 minute to the next. Be the first to hear the latest money news and market trends with CNBC on TuneIn. Wherever your day takes you, listen to CNBC's full slate of programming, including shows like Fast Money, Squawk Box, and Mad Money with Jim Cramer. And when the next big business story breaks, CNBC lets you know with live updates and commentary. At the office, at home, or on the go. Search CNBC on TuneIn to listen.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio.
D.com.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Closing bell for this Tuesday, November 12th, and it looks like it's going to be a higher session for the equity market, barely, with the Dow holding on to a gain of less than 0.1%. We're going to need a few moments for these numbers to reflect accurate settlement. Looks like the NASDAQ will set a record, the composite index gaining about 0.3% on the day. In the broader market, S&P 500 higher by about 2%. Now, early in the day, the markets were kind of hoping for a little bit of clarity from President Trump on a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. He spoke at the Economic Club of New York and said a significant deal could happen soon. Then he went on to say during the Q&A that if the U.S. did not make a deal, it would raise tariffs significantly. He also went on to renew his assault on the Fed, saying it was hurting the American economy by not copying other central banks in deploying negative interest rates. Tomorrow we will hear from Fed Chair Jay Powell. Today in the bond market after a holiday yesterday, the 10-year was down more than 2 basis points. We were last quoted with a yield of 1.91%. Shares in the drug maker AbbVie were up nearly 2%. The company sold $30 billion in bonds to fund its purchase of Allergan. The top U.S. milk producer, Dean Foods, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The company is also in advanced talks with the Dairy Farmers of America about a possible sale. We had shares in JetBlue Airways falling 2.4% today. The carrier is revamping its fare categories for the first time since they were introduced back in 2015. Now, the company says these changes will give it the tools to more aggressively drive fares lower. CBS Corp losing about 3.5% on the day after reporting a drop in quarterly profit. The company invested more in original programming for its streaming services, including a new deal for the Champions League soccer tournament. By the way, this is the final report before CBS Corp merges with Viacom. I'm Doug Krisner. That is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Your next move will be your last.
Nobody move a muscle.
Damn, Stippy, you got some moves.
And I'm moving on from town to town.
Time is money. Let's go. Come on, move it.
Shake it up. Shake it up.
Bloomberg Business Week, Movers and Shakers with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, it's time to do a little moving and shaking. Jason Kelly here with you. Peggy Collins sitting in for Carol Masser. She's over in London. Peggy's up from D.C., hanging out, watching the president earlier today in New York City here with me in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. So, Pegs, let's break down the trade today. You heard the final numbers there from Doug Krisner. The Dow ending up flat, the S&P up a touch, NASDAQ up a touch. Let's go down a level on the S&P. You had basically an even split, 248 names up, 250 down, 7 unchanged. And as we look at what maybe some specific names are, what jumped out to you, Peg?
Well, one of the stocks that jumped out to me today was Walt Disney, essentially launching its new streaming video service. So the stock saw a pop coming out of the gate in the morning, but then it was marred by some outages, glitches that consumers were encountering. So saw a sharp decline, but then has moved up and recovered and ending the day up about 1%. So that was an interesting story from today.
I really feel like this is going to go down, and maybe it's just because I've been talking about it, it feels like nonstop for the last week. And because I was in Los Angeles not too long ago. But this is the story of 2019 streaming in a lot of ways. Disney, the big kahuna in so many ways, rich content library, the product of so many deals that has led to this point. And, you know, earlier in the show, Geeta Ranganathan and Jeff Greenfield were talking about how Disney has essentially already won in many ways, won the streaming war. So we'll see whether that actually turns out to be true. It feels like it's true for the moment. And as you say, the stock, even with a few little bumps along the way this morning with the rollout, still ending up about 1.3%. And of course, coming off of a very strong earnings report last week on Friday, the stock was up almost 4%. I was looking at Tyson, the CEO saying that actually some bad news elsewhere in the world, African swine fever in Asia specifically, is actually pushing up global protein demand and prices. You'll remember that this is Tyson, the top U.S. meat processor. They missed earnings estimates in the fiscal fourth quarter, but they're expecting at least high single-digit growth this fiscal year, and they're well-positioned, they say, quote, to take advantage of opportunities in the global marketplace. So that is one of your best performers on the S&P, up a little over 7% today. Another name I wanted to point out, Peggy, if I could, just because you know that Carol Massar and I are a little obsessed with this name, is Peloton. Peloton, we have watched it so closely. Dave Wilson shaking his head. He's coming up next. I just love looking at this because I feel like it's such an interesting indicator. It's up for the third day in a row, and so recovering a little bit, still not back up to that $29 a share IPO price. I know I'm going to hear from Dave.
We all got to go for a ride after the show.
I know, exactly. Let's take a look at volatility. The VIX, it was up just a touch, about 0.5%, closing at 12.76. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Dave, you're up.
Hi, my name is Dave.
Wilson, where are you? Wilson!
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
We're going for a price on Wilson. Open up the door, it's Dave. Who? Dave.
Hey, Mr. Wilson!
And here he is, slightly delayed by our technical issue, but Dave Wilson nonetheless.
Oh, please.
We always wait for you, Dave.
Everything in due time,
Of
Jason.
course.
That's what it's all about.
I'm just so happy I got the birds earlier. I'm still living high on that one.
Really?
I feel good about that.
Yeah, well, you should. In any case...
You've got a stock to talk about.
I do. It's called Verso. It's a maker of paper packaging and pulp. Now, the company was owned by International Paper before being acquired by private equity firm Apollo Global in 2006 and taken public in 2008. Verso went through Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2016 after a takeover of rival NewPage failed to revive its business. Since emerging from court protection, the company's shares have been listed under the ticker VRS. Verso soared almost 11-fold in not quite 18 months before peaking at a record in October of last year. While the shares later gave back most of that gain, they have rallied in the past 3 months, and the recovery accelerated today after the release of third quarter results. Verso posted an unexpected profit for the quarter. They got some help from cost cuts, and sales didn't fall as much as analysts predicted in a Bloomberg survey. On top of that, the company said it would sell a paper mill in Maine and another one in Wisconsin to one of its peers, Pixel Specialty Solutions, for a total of $400 million. You put that all together, and Verso shares posted their biggest gain since the company came out of bankruptcy. They jumped more than 20.5% on the day.
Wow. It's a big name. I also love, and Peggy does as well, those names that come out of private equity ownership. Always interesting to see that.
That's right. I know you love PE, Jason.
I know. Well, I'm so fascinated by the role that they continue to play, especially as we're talking about Walgreens and we're talking about a couple other moves in the market. Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Before I let you go, though, I have to ask you, how was your trip to Austin?
Great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Did you buy any records?
A few.
A few? Yeah, what was the highlight?
I came down there with a half-full suitcase. I came back with a full one plus another bag.
Wow.
So,
that is a lot.
What's your highlight? What was the thing you were happiest to get?
Let's see. I'll tell you, there was a band down in Texas called Los Lonely Boys.
Yeah, no.
They put out 2 of their own records independently before being signed to a major label. I got the first one. The dealer said it was the second copy he'd ever seen.
Wow. All right, Dave Wilson, back in New York after what sounds like a very fruitful trip to Austin, Texas for a big record show down there. We're always grateful to him for his stock, his chart, and his great context on the markets. Let's get over to Bob Moon now. We appreciate him as well. He's got your world and national headlines. Hey,
now,
Bob.
you're going to explain to us what a record is, right? Look for tariffs on China to be boosted substantially if Beijing doesn't make the concessions necessary to reach a trade deal. That warning from President Trump today as he made a speech to the Economic Club of New York. At the same time, he returned to his oft-stated prediction that a significant Phase 1 deal could happen soon, putting the onus on China.
And I won't use this word cheated. I will not say the word cheated, but nobody's cheated better than China, but I will not say that.
Trump said China has been deceiving the world by portraying itself as a developing nation when it's really an economic superpower. The Supreme Court said today that a survivor and relatives of victims of the Sandy Hook elementary school shooting can pursue their lawsuit against the maker of the rifle used to kill 26 people. The justices rejected an appeal from Remington Arms, which argued it should be shielded by a 2005 federal law preventing most lawsuits against firearms manufacturers when their products are used in crimes. He is 17 years old and he destroyed his own lungs just by vaping. Doctors at Henry Ford Medical Center in Detroit describe it as a senseless, preventable death. And fortunately for their young patient, they were able to perform what's believed to be the first double lung transplant in the U.S. Dr. Victor Koba says the patient has a long way to go, but is making good progress.
Within 2 weeks, he was off the ventilator and starting to work with our physical therapy team, starting to walk again and slowly regaining his strength.
Keep right on vaping if you want, the doctors say. You may be gambling your future on the availability of donor lungs. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter. I'm Bob Moon.
You don't usually find the titans of finance, business, and politics sitting around together.
There's been this transfer of royal power and royal prerogative.
But amazingly, they're nearly all here every weekday.
Let's talk about their data. What are you looking for?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow.
So where does the circuit breaker come from?
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
He's got to respond, doesn't he?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
"Only you can prevent wildfires."
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Join us in New York City on November 21st as Bloomberg Pursuits convenes the second annual The Year Ahead Luxury. Speakers include Jennifer Hyman, CEO Rent the Runway, Alessandro Bogliolo, CEO Tiffany & Company, Robert A.M. Stern, renowned architect. Supporting sponsor, Diamond Producers Association. Participating sponsor, St. Regis Hotels and Resorts. For more information, go to BloombergLive.com/TYA Luxury. Invitation code RADIO.
Open calendar. What's my schedule looking like?
Next Thursday, you will be caught in an emergency flash flood between Park and First Street.
What? No, that doesn't work. I'm busy then. Decline. Decline.
Floods don't exactly work around your schedule. Disasters don't plan ahead. But you can. It starts with talking to your loved ones about making an emergency plan. So don't wait. Communicate. Get started today at ready.gov/plan. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
The world is a noisy place, but whether I'm here or here, my phone calls are always loud and clear on my Doro 6620. Hi, love. Yes, I can hear you perfectly. I'm 10 minutes away. Get your Doro 6620 from Amazon, Tesco, and O2 today.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Hiya. Oh, give me one of your chicken selects.
No.
Please, I've done my backing again.
You seemed totally fine when you walked.
And my boyfriend split up with me. Came home to find him with my sister.
Didn't know you had a sister. Is there anything I can do?
One of your chicken selects will cheer me up.
Tender chicken breast strips seasoned with a crispy coating. Chicken selects from McDonald's. Get your own.
Come on, please give me one.
Served after 10:30 a.m., except in selected restaurants, which will serve this from 11 a.m.
In the dictionary, a podcast is this: a digital audio file made available on the internet, typically as a series, of which new installments can be received by subscribers automatically. But on TuneIn, a podcast is this.
I'm Rachel Martin with David Green, and this is Up First from NPR News.
And it's defined like this.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show.
From news, sports, to pop culture, comedy, and beyond. Define your own podcast possibilities on TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Good. Here's a swing and a drive deep to right field. Looking up. Goodbye, baseball.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off homers, follow TuneIn on social media to discover the latest and greatest in live sports.
With the 24th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft.
From live reminders that the biggest MLB games are on the air, to recommendations of the best new sports talk shows and podcasts.
He's going to be fine. He's going to be good right away in 3 years.
Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Hey, can't watch the big NBA game because your life's just too busy? I've got some news for you. TuneIn Premium is the answer to all your problems. Hear every home and away game live or on demand everywhere you go. Just search NBA to listen.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So today the markets failed to get much in the way of clarity from President Trump when it comes to a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. He told the Economic Club of New York a significant deal could happen soon, although during the Q&A, Trump said if we don't make a deal, we'll raise tariffs significantly. At the end of the day, the equity market was mixed. The Dow was essentially flat. The S&P 500 picked up about 0.2%. The NASDAQ comp set a record high at 84.86 with a gain of nearly 0.3% on the day. Shares in the drug maker AbbVie rose 0.9%. The company sold $30 billion in bonds to fund its purchase of Allergan. The top U.S. milk producer, Dean Foods, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We had shares in JetBlue down 2.3%. The carrier is revamping its fare categories to try to drive fares lower more aggressively. CBS Corp, that's CBS, the broadcaster, down 3.6% after reporting a drop in profit. Disney, on the other hand, picked up about 1.4%. The company debuted its streaming service, Disney Plus, today. In the bond market, U.S. 10-year Treasury last quoted with a yield of 1.91%. You're caught up on markets. Let's get back to Bloomberg Business Week.
Doug, thanks a lot. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly, Peggy Collins, right here on Bloomberg Radio. Can't go wrong with little U2 on a day that looks probably a lot like Dublin looks this time of year. Wayne Wicker is back with us, Chief Investment Officer for Vantage Point Investment Advisors, looking after about $29 billion. He's based down in Washington, D.C., just like my co-host today, Peggy Collins, made his way up here to New York City, braved all that President Trump traffic. See, you sort of brought all that with you, Wayne. You know, usually you have to deal with that in Washington. We don't have to deal with it as much in New York. So.
Right. Well, I claim innocence today because I flew in from Minneapolis today, so I avoided all that.
Right. So it's not your fault. We won't blame you at all. But talk to us about the market right now, because I feel like we expected to hear a little bit from the president on trade. Didn't hear much. Market didn't move that much. We're going to hear from Jay Powell tomorrow up on Capitol Hill. What's moving traders these days? What's moving investors right now to be either bullish or bearish?
Well, Jason, I think we've seen over the last couple of months that we've had better outcomes on several issues. You know, the U.S.-China is approaching that initial accord with phase one potentially. You've had the chances of a disorderly exit by the U.K. dissipating here in the near term. I think one of the real drivers, and we've talked about this before, was that third quarter expectations were really dire, and we really did a much better, not only on the earnings line, but also on the revenue line. And I think that's the one that's important. You can manufacture ways to improve your earnings. It's a lot harder on the sales line to do that. And sales were better than expected. So I think that has driven a lot of the market here in the last month or so.
That's interesting because a lot of what our team has done in covering trade has really been to take a hard look at what businesses are doing or not doing as a result of the uncertainty around trade. Were they holding back on business investment? And I know the Fed was looking at that as well. But as you're seemingly saying that what is coming out of companies is not necessarily that they were pulling back or seeing a big effect in terms of revenue drop from the tariffs in terms of maybe customers holding back on spending.
Well, see, Peggy, I think what is happening is, I think you're right. I think a lot of CFOs are holding back a little bit on budgets because they're not quite sure where this tariff issue is going to go. However, I think consumers, of which consumer discretionary is 70% of what happens in the United States, employment is really strong, and so people continue to buy at the bottom line. So I think you have this dichotomy of corporate America maybe holding back a little bit on CapEx, but you still have a lot of retail purchasing out there, whether it's homes or autos or a lot of other disposable types of things.
So where do you invest in a market like this? Are there sectors that are a little bit more attractive, especially since we've had this moment, we were talking about this at the top of the show, where we've seen a pretty significant shift in sentiment, toward the optimistic side of things. So what do you do for the balance of the year here?
Well, certainly I think the focus on risk has changed dramatically in the last month, right? And so those asset categories that really have been the trade all year, defensive, such as utilities and some of the REITs, they haven't done so well recently. Low vol, people are trading out of that. And I think that that's probably appropriate if you think that at this point in time, earnings are going to be better and you're not going to have a conclusion to this economic expansion over the next 6 to 12 months. So there certainly are some areas that are responding well to the backup in rates, whether it's financials, it could be some of the industrials that are showing a little bit of life here. And I think that it's, for long-term investors, the more important area is to be invested in equities in aggregate and not get shaken out with the day-to-day news flow that may create a short-term concern, right. But long-term, you're going to miss out on what I think is still a pretty positive view for equities here.
When you think about investing in equities, how do you decide how much to put in passive vehicles, for example, index funds, ETFs, or where to stock pick?
Well, I think, again, that is up to the individual and what they are really able to do. I think individuals are much better off going with whether it's mutual funds, whether they're passive or active. I think that, from our perspective, we try to think about the fact that, there are pockets, regardless of the asset class, where active can add value. Some of those that are more attractive might be in the areas such as emerging markets, which seem to be really inefficient. So that's an area that's ripe for active management to be beating indexes on a pretty consistent basis.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Wayne Wicker is Chief Investment Officer for Vantage Point Investment Advisors. normally based down in Washington, D.C., travels a lot, and so he's joining us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Coming up, we're going to get into the business of sports. We talked a little bit a few minutes ago at Pegs about what's going on down with the Nets. Well, our guest coming up, George Pine, he has got a fund, a new partnership with some big name investors that's going to help fuel some of his investments into sports and entertainment. I love the intersection there. And then later on, we're going to talk a little Tesla, figure out, as people are buying Teslas, what are they then not buying? It's part of a great series that our team has done as part of the Hyperdrive team. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week here on a Tuesday afternoon. The president has left town. Our eyes turn to Washington tomorrow. Jay Powell, what he may be saying that will make investors feel better or worse about the balance of the year. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Stocks finished mixed amid lingering uncertainty about the outlook for a U.S.-China trade deal. The Dow Jones Industrial Average ended unchanged. The S&P 500 gained 5. The Nasdaq Composite rose 22, closing at a new high. Walt Disney gained more than 1% as its Disney Plus streaming service went live. There were some early technical glitches, though it still stirred excitement and buzz on social media. Former HBO CEO Richard Plepler reportedly is in talks on an exclusive deal to produce original content for Apple TV+. Sources say a deal could be finalized in the next few weeks. HBO developed hits including Game of Thrones and Veep under Plepler's watch. 3G Capital, the private equity firm known for buying food giants from Kraft to Burger King, is eyeing a new frontier, elevators. Sources say it is among the suitors that submitted bids for the elevator business of Germany's ThyssenKrupp. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
You know your body, and you know when something's off, when something doesn't feel quite right. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, rashes, and fever. They could be signs of lupus. Listen to your body. Take care of yourself. We're here to help you take control of your health. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There will be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
On the goal line, Martin scores and takes it home.
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores.
Hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
And a move, and a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
What if you could keep up with cable news even when you're on the go? With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to MSNBC live without any commercial interruptions. All of the news, none of the ads. Listen live on TuneIn Premium today.
Couldn't. Here's a swing and a drive deep to right field. Looking up. Goodbye, baseball.
Between game-winning shots and walk-off homers, follow TuneIn on social media to discover the latest and greatest in live sports.
With the 24th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft.
From live reminders that the biggest MLB games are on the air to recommendations of the best new sports talk shows and podcasts.
He's going to be fine. He's going to be good right away in 3 years.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Hi, this is Brian Weber, host of NFL First and Goal every Sunday, kicking off at 1 Eastern only on TuneIn Premium. Be sure to listen this Sunday for the ultimate football fan experience, featuring 7 hours of commercial-free coverage of every scoring play around the NFL.
This is the TuneIn Newsreel with top news stories from today.
The new streaming service Disney Plus launched earlier than planned today, but within a few hours, some users were complaining on Twitter about glitches. Those who were able to access the service were giving rave reviews, while Disney shares are up more than 1%. The maker of Red Hook, Kona, and Omission Beers, Craft Brew Alliance, is being sold to Anheuser-Busch InBev.
Hear breaking news as it happens with live around-the-clock coverage from Fox News on TuneIn.
In the dictionary, a podcast is this: a digital audio file made available on the internet, typically as a series of which new installments can be received by subscribers automatically. But on TuneIn, a podcast is this.
I'm Rachel Martin with David Green, and this is Up First from NPR News.
And it's defined like this.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show.
From news, sports, to pop culture, comedy, and beyond. Define your own podcast possibilities on TuneIn.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, we're going to catch up with an old friend of mine, George Pine. He is the CEO and founder of Bruin Sports Capital. Big deals happening there, Peggy. We love talking about sports and business. You know that.
That's right. Great combo.
Yeah.
Next to the universe here at Bloomberg.
Exactly. We're going to get into that in just a minute. First, let's get a check on what's going on in the business world after the close with Doug Krisner. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Jason. Much of the equity market edged higher today as it was trying to sort out the likelihood of a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. Here in New York, speaking at the Economic Club, President Trump said a significant deal could happen soon, but he kind of tempered that a bit during the Q&A, saying that if we don't make a deal, we'll raise tariffs significantly. At the same time, he renewed his assault on the Fed, saying the central bank was hurting the U.S. by not copying other central banks in deploying negative interest rates. Now, speaking of the Fed, we will hear tomorrow from Fed Chair Jay Powell. He'll be testifying to congressional committee. So on the day, the Dow finishes unchanged, 27,691. The S&P ended off session highs, a gain here of about 0.2%. The NASDAQ, to be fair, did set a record at 84.86, picking up about 0.3% on the day. Disney rises 1.4% on the debut of that streaming service, Disney Plus. CBS Corp, on the other hand, down 3.6% after reporting a drop in profit. JetBlue Airways falling 2.3%. The carrier is revamping its fare categories for the first time since they were introduced back in 2015 as a way to more aggressively drive fares lower. U.S. 10-year Treasury last quoted in New York at a yield of 1.90%, so we're down more than 3 basis points on the day. Some dollar strength in spite of those falling yields. Actually, we were up for the sixth time in 7 sessions, with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index rising 0.2%. That's a look at markets. Back to Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and George Pine is here with us. He's the founder and CEO of Bruin Sports Capital in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio with Peggy Collins and myself. Great to see you.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
All right, so big news in your world. You've got a new partnership with some big-name investors. You've been doing this for a while. This really takes it to the next level. Tell us about this deal.
Well, we have an investment of initial investment of $600 million from the Jordan Company and CVC. What it really is a validation of what we've done the last 5 years, an endorsement, of course, of what we're doing in the future. I think what it really means for us is we've invested behind the disruption technologies provided in media, and we'll continue to do so. And so we're very excited. This enhances our global scale. CVC's in 25 offices around the world with a tradition in Formula One and MotoGP. And also the Jordan Company's had a terrific track record of investment for almost 4 decades. So I think it really enhances our capabilities and also scale and access to capital. Now this means that there really isn't anything we can't do if it's a good idea. And as an entrepreneur, for me, that's very exciting.
Can you expand a little bit more in terms of what you mean by that disruption in media and the technology around it that's really opened up this space for you?
Right. So people now are consuming content on so many different devices, and that's going to continue. Right? As the cable bundle changes, younger people consume content quite differently than we did. And so we're making investments around that. So we invested in a company called Delta Tray as an example. It provides, it's a systems integrator and provides the technology for all the major sports leagues and sports around the world. So the IOC, FIFA, UEFA, the NFL, NBA, PJ Tour, they're providing the technology behind that. And that business is exploding because people are consuming content differently. We also have a venture fund called Courtside Ventures that's made 55 investments in 35 small technology companies that have done really well. So we're in and about the change in media consumption. And that can also be something like a branding company. So design in a direct-to-consumer world is going to be very important. So we invested in a design company. So every investment we've made so far has been informed by, hey, the way people consume content's going to change. We want to be around that tailwind. And lastly, we've invested in live events because I think live events are going to become more valuable. Something that gets somebody out of their seat of their home and they go to that's a passion point is going to have real value. So that's our thesis. And now we also have more capability given the scale of the financial investment.
You and I were talking before we came on air, our shared, not your hometown, sort of my hometown of Atlanta. Such an interesting sort of place to look at what's happening next in sports. We were talking about the pro soccer team down there. What are you seeing in sports that's surprising you right now, either in terms of consumption, in terms of something that's catching on? Your job, in part, is to sort of look around the corner.
Well, what you see is just that it's changing, right? So we do the over-the-top network for the NFL in 181 countries, and we're selling subscriptions one person at a time. And I'm 54, so I'm I guess that's old. But what I'm saying is you can tell what someone's going to buy a subscription at what price they're not, what ad works, what doesn't, what platform to reach that person does and doesn't. And I say this, that right now we're selling a package of NFL games, but 5 or 10 years from now, you could be selling insurance services, mortgage service. I did work at NASCAR, run NASCAR, so maybe ketchup and mustard too.
Right.
But it's really that relationship with the consumer, and data is really the future. Understanding data and how you can impact data is really the future.
Are you seeing people still go to live events? I hate to be so blunt about it, but in terms of everyone seems to be able to get everything on their phones minute to minute, are we seeing growth in live events, and if so, where?
Well, I think it's an excellent question, and it's certainly getting much more difficult today to sell tickets to anything. And you also raise a very good point that I think the main competition for sports and entertainment is not other sports and entertainment. It's really user-generated content. I mean, think about, I have teenagers, and they're on the device and they're Snapchatting and sharing. That is consuming people's time, even ourselves. I'm sure we're all embarrassed to say how much time we're on our personal device. Well, that is coming at the expense of other things. And so to me, that's why you have to be very good at data management, and that's why your presentation and curation of your content is more important. And that's why I'm excited about our future, because we're going to be in the middle of all that. You have to have better marketing, better content distribution. That's going to be the difference between success or failure in the new world, as I would say.
So only about 40 seconds left, George, but today is the day that Disney Plus launches. That obviously is one of the disruptors going on. Streaming obviously has changed the landscape dramatically. But live sports, that has been one of the things that's been hanging out there as the reason that people are hanging on to some of their existing media packages or consumption. Where does sports go from a consumption?
Well, that's a very good question. I think the money, and then by the way, a bunch of rights are coming up in the next 5 years. The money is going to be in the old media. So the question for the valuable rights holders is, if I don't have good new media content, I'm giving away a whole generation of consumers. So how do I balance my needs for money versus the long-term interest of reaching a whole generation of people? And those people that aren't kind of tied to the money, it's an opportunity for them because they're not restricted, they can be more creative with their digital content.
All right. So much to talk about, as always. You'll have to come back soon. George Pine, founder and CEO, Bruin Sports Capital, doing a big deal with some big names. Talking about CVC and the Jordan Company. Watch this space for sure. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Peggy Collins here with me. And just with us, too, is Bob Moon. He's got your world national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, declaring that his administration has exceeded expectations. President Trump claimed credit today for the creation of 7 million jobs, although only 6.25 million have been created since he's been in office. Trump also suggested that Americans will likely have to vote for him because the challengers he's running against are all, as he put it, crazy. He says his administration can do even more than it already has.
If we take back the House 2020 and retain the Senate and the White House, you will see things that even this room, and you've experienced a lot of great times over the last 2.5 years, but even you will be surprised to see.
Trump spoke to the Economic Club of New York in the same Midtown Manhattan ballroom where he celebrated his election to the White House in 2016. The Supreme Court heard arguments today for and against the DACA program, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which has allowed about 800,000 children brought here illegally by their parents to remain in the U.S., something the Trump administration wants to come to an end. Representative Sylvia Garcia of Texas is hoping the High Court rules in favor of children who could be your neighbors, many of whom have grown to attend college, have jobs, or have joined the military.
We're here today to support you and all our dreamers, and defend your rights. Because dreamers are Americans, and they are here to stay because this is their country.
If the justices uphold the administration's decision to end the program, those who were shielded by DACA for years could lose their work permits and become vulnerable to deportation. Global News, 24 hours a day, on air, and at TikTok, on Twitter. I'm Bob Moon.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power Award information, visit jdpower.com/award.
Startups and research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology are fueling the innovation economy. And few people are better positioned to see what's on the horizon in New Jersey than physicist and state representative Andrew Zwicker.
How technology is transforming our financial sector is revolutionary, and so much of that is in New Jersey. We are innovators when it comes to agriculture, and there is opportunity now for great transformation in how are we going to grow food in an ever-growing population, and how do we turn urban centers into agricultural centers. Autonomous vehicles is another one where we have some of the world's leading experts, and how this will transform how those who are either elderly or are visually impaired or mobilely impaired can start to use autonomous vehicles to transform their lives and have access to transportation they could have never had before.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu/research.
If you're planning on driving this weekend, expect delays on the A406 North Circular Road. There'll be road closures between Edmonton and Tottenham from 10 p.m. on Friday the 15th of November to 5 a.m. on Monday the 18th of November, while we carry out essential maintenance and repairs. All roads in the surrounding area will be extremely busy, so please allow more time for your journey and expect delays in the area. Plan ahead and check alternative routes at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Hey, can't watch the big NBA game because your life's just too busy? I've got some news for you. TuneIn Premium is the answer to all your problems. Hear every home and away game live or on demand everywhere you go. Just search NBA to listen.
Cook got a block. Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
NFL fans, hear every live game on TuneIn Premium.
The snap, the give Jones up the middle, runs it back. He's to the 10, to the 5, to the end zone, touchdown.
This Thursday, hear the home and away call as the Pittsburgh Steelers visit the Cleveland Browns at 8:20 p.m. Eastern.
Getting pressure again, rolls to his right. He's going to run with it. He's a 5, touchdown.
At home or on the go, hear the home and away call of every NFL game this season on TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
This is the TuneIn Newsreel with top news stories from today.
The new streaming service Disney Plus launched earlier than planned today, but within a few hours, some users were complaining on Twitter about glitches. Those who were able to access the service were giving rave reviews, while Disney shares are up more than 1%. The maker of Red Hook, Kona, and Omission Beers, Craft Brew Alliance, is being sold to Anheuser-Busch InBev.
Hear breaking news as it happens with live around-the-clock coverage from Fox News on TuneIn.
Next time you look up at the stars, think about this.
Inside you are the remains of a stellar explosion. You are made of stardust. And without the stars, there wouldn't be us.
I'm Guy Raj, the wonders of the universe and the people who still look up every night. Next time on the TED Radio Hour from NPR. You can subscribe to the TED Radio Hour on TuneIn.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Get social with TuneIn. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest and greatest audio on the app. Explore exclusive content. Learn about hot new podcasts and get alerted when the big game, well, it's about to begin. Add TuneIn to your feed and be in the know when it matters most.
And learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
So the equity market managed some gains today. The Dow, though, unchanged at the level 27,691. The S&P did pick up 0.2%. The NASDAQ composites had a record high 84.86 with a gain of 0.3% today. Out in front of that advance, Facebook shares, they were higher by about 2.6% after announcing a new payment feature. Overall, the market struggled to find much in the way of clarity from President Trump on a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. He told the New York Economic Club a significant deal could happen soon, and then he went on to say that if we don't get a deal, we'll raise tariffs significantly. He also renewed his assault on the Fed, saying the central bank was hurting the American economy by not copying other central banks in deploying negative interest rates. By the way, we're going to hear from Fed Chair Jay Powell tomorrow in congressional testimony. Today, the U.S. 10-year Treasury was down about 2 basis points. We were last quoted in New York at around 1.92%. JetBlue Airways falling 2.6%. The carrier is revamping its fare categories to give it the necessary tools to more aggressively drive fares lower. Disney, on the other hand, picked up 1.4% as it debuts its new streaming service, Disney+. Few technical glitches early in the day. At the same time, a lot of buzz on social media. The new Star Wars series, Mandalorian, was trending through the day. You're caught up on markets. Let's get back to Bloomberg Business Week.
Doug, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio. Well, this, I have to say, has been one of my favorite things over the past couple weeks at Pegs, which is this Tesla survey. It's the Tesla Model 3 survey. Specifically, the team over at Hyperdrive has put it together. They talked about quality and reliability. They talked about service and charging. They talked about autopilot. And now, part 4, the market evolution, which really goes to answer the question, all right, if people are buying Tesla, what aren't they buying instead? Tom Randall joins us, senior reporter for Bloomberg. He's on the phone here in New York City. All right, Tom, what'd you find?
Well, first of all, we talked to 5,000 Model 3 owners, and one surprising thing was that the number of people who previously owned economy cars. So more than half of owners previously drove a car that cost less than $30,000. I mean, we're talking about the Prius, the Honda Accord, Honda Civic, Toyota Camry, Mazda 3. Those were all in the top 10 trade-in cars. And that's really unusual to see that many customers going from, a $25,000 car to the average selling price for the Model 3 is $50,000. And so, one question there is whether, all these are these all just early adopters, or are we seeing people kind of fundamentally reassess the value of a car, much like, what happened with the iPhone when it came out and everyone was like, $500 for a phone, are you crazy? And, are people like starting to see this vehicle as something a little bit different? You include the government incentives and gas savings and, and the value of driving this like high-tech machine. But then, we also looked at it. The picture completely kind of flips if you look at the trade-ins as a percentage of each brand's sales. So, like Prius, it's not great for Toyota. Prius customers are leaving, but Toyota's huge. But for BMW, we are seeing a ton of people leave BMW. The 3 Series was the number 2 trade-in, but also you can see it kind of across their line. And we created we called it the vulnerability index. It's the proportion of trade-ins for each brand's market share. And BMW is by far the most vulnerable. It was 5 times as much impact to the BMW as it has on Mercedes, even though those 2 brands compete in many of the same categories. And we think why that is BMW, they call themselves the ultimate driving machine. That's their brand. And people who drive BMW want to have fun on the road. And what we're hearing over and over in this survey is that, Tesla performance is its biggest draw. And, for Mercedes, it's more about, brand cachet and comfort and that kind of luxury.
Tom, I was looking at this top 10 cars that you list, and you listed the Toyota Prius and the BMW, as you said. What else surprised you about this point in the survey of those 5,000 users in terms of what they said about the Tesla?
Well, we asked people also like what they thought about the car overall, and like we saw elsewhere in this survey, just really high ratings across the board. That Model 3 owners love their cars. 99% of Model 3 owners said that they would recommend one to their friends and family.
That's amazing.
A huge number. Yeah. And that's really important for Tesla because Tesla doesn't advertise in a traditional sense. There's no Super Bowl ads. There's no magazine spreads or, instead they rely a lot on this word of mouth. And when I followed up with a lot of our respondents in phone interviews, every single one, most of them unprompted, talked about taking people on test drives, taking their friends and family and on test drives of the car and converting them. So they're acting as this kind of like army of salespeople for Tesla, and really key to the future for the company.
Well, and what's so interesting, not to get too meta about it, but reading through, all your work here, the enthusiasm and the response rate alone and the volume of the responses that you got individually and in aggregate really says a lot, to me at least.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty stunning. For part 2 of our survey about customer service, we wanted to go back to people who had been in some kind of crash or had some kind of body work done. So we sent out a secondary kind of follow-up survey. And of the people that opened up the email, 100% of the people clicked through to our survey. I mean, that's insane. Happen. Yeah.
Everybody who's ever sent out any sort of survey listening to this right now wants to get some sort of that magic sauce. That's crazy.
Yeah, it really is. And that really came through when I talked to one of the most interesting parts of the project is I really wanted to reach out to people who you don't normally think of as Tesla drivers, right? Like the core Tesla demographic is California software developer, male in his 30s or 40s, making a pretty high income. So we wanted to, if Tesla wants to continue to grow at the rate that it's been growing, and if EVs are going to be adopted in general, we wanted to see like what people in Middle America were thinking, what women are thinking about this car. So I talked to a plumber from Iowa, a veterinarian from Washington, a law enforcement worker from Indiana. I had a librarian from Clarksville, Tennessee, an African American woman who told me how librarians are passive aggressive and they just like to floor it.
That's really great. Well, I highly recommend that anybody who's interested in Tesla, in cars, in consumer products. I love the comparison you made, Tom, between this and the iPhone. It is a different state of mind that comes through very clearly. It's a terrific project, just another great contribution to the world of journalism in a lot of ways, just thinking about this company in a very different way. Tom Randall, senior reporter for Bloomberg. He joined us on the phone from New York City. Check out his work. Peggy Collins, you're going to be here in New York. You're not going to be with me. That's okay. You're going to be seeing your other peeps, but so grateful to you for spending some time bringing your insights from the Trump speech as well.
Thanks, Jason. Jason, it was a real treat.
All right. And you will be here in New York talking to your team back in D.C. tomorrow, obviously keeping a close eye on Jay Powell's testimony. I am going to be down tomorrow actually at the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, helping host a conference on security. The second year we've been doing this. I'll be doing the Bloomberg Business Week show live from there, 2 to 5 p.m. Wall Street time. You're going to want to check that out. I'm going to catch up with Frank Bisignano, the CEO of Fiserv. He will be joining me. Alice Greenwald, who runs the 9/11 Memorial. Also, you're going to hear part of my interview with Admiral Mike Mullen. He was in the room during the capture and killing of Osama bin Laden. There's a new exhibit there at the 9/11 Memorial. We'll talk about that. Craig Newmark, many, many more. You've been listening to Bloomberg Business Week. For Peggy Collins, I'm Jason Kelly. Have a lovely Tuesday, everyone. You've been listening to Bloomberg Radio.
The starting gun for your weekday race. Karen Moscow.
Trade talks, royal equities.
Nathan Hager.
Apple has reversed course.
Bloomberg Daybreak, beginning at 5 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is the Bloomberg Green Business Report. Riddle me this. What does a Marine in the rain have to do with this bumbling cartoon detective from the 1980s? Think trench coat. The United States Marine Corps just made an about-face when it comes to what's the acceptable way to stay dry. Umbrellas are now okay. A new paragraph in the official uniform regulation says Marines may carry an all-black, plain, standard, or collapsible umbrella at their option during inclement weather with the service and dress uniforms, meaning only with the green service uniform and the more formal dress blues, but not out in the field or in battle. So why change now? That's still a little cloudy, since female Marines have been able to use umbrellas since 1972. Up to now, men have been allowed to use a trench coat, known jokingly as the Inspector Gadget. But that option's largely been dismissed as too ugly. That's the Bloomberg Green Business Report. I'm Bob Moon.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's environment of market volatility, Pershing's Prime Services is well positioned to support the needs of hedge funds and other alternative investment managers. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, platform access, or business expansion, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and agile enough to meet your evolving demands. Pershing helps to solve the needs of clients by advocating for them, providing unwavering strength, deep supply, and award-winning service that is at the core of everything we do. Find out what sets Pershing's prime brokerage team apart.
Learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers offered by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Visit our website at Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
In the real world, there are no rabbits in hats, crystal balls, or cards that turn into money. Instead, you get business information from top-tier analysts and experts.
What should expectations be for this latest round of negotiations?
That's actually better, isn't it?
They're both trying to say they have the upper hand.
Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg Radio. We have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
From the Bloomberg Newsroom in New York, I'm Bob Moon. President Trump mixed his optimism over a trade accord with China with tough talk about what will happen if he can't make a deal. He said if there ends up being no deal, he'll, quote, substantially raise tariffs on China. Trump laid out his economic plans as the central pillar of his 2020 re-election campaign, telling the Economic Club of New York that his policies have generated a boom in growth and jobs. And during a Q&A session after his speech, Trump said the reason he's so confident about being re-elected is simple.
Look, you have no choice, because the people we're running against are crazy. They're crazy.
Amid Wall Street worries over the year-and-a-half-long trade war with China, Trump tried to redirect the audience. He returned to his argument the Federal Reserve is holding back the U.S. economy. At the same time, he downplayed concerns over a sluggish economy, saying that the status quo with China is not an option, even if it means some short-term pain for the U.S. As the U.S. Supreme Court begins deciding the future of the DACA program, large crowds gathered in California to demonstrate their support of the program. Letitia is a dreamer who was brought to the U.S. as a child. She says she doesn't want to be sent home. She already has a home.
This is her home. This is the only home I know.
Nearly a quarter of the country's undocumented immigrants reside in California. There did not appear to be any support for maintaining DACA among the 5 conservatives on the High Court today. Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Brett Kavanaugh were among those suggesting the administration has provided sufficient reason for ending the program. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman has more.
The case was argued by Theodore Olson, who served in the Justice Department for Republican presidents.
These individuals have become part of the community
community, served in the armed forces, the last persons in the world that we want to evict from this country.
The House of Representatives, under Speaker Nancy Pelosi, has passed a bill to allow them to stay.
We are grateful to their parents for giving us the opportunity to have you in our country.
The court's majority has previously ruled that immigration policy is up to the president, who says he'd keep the young people here if he got a comprehensive bill that includes his border wall. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Hillary Clinton says she doesn't understand why the UK government has failed to release a report on Russian influence in British politics before the country holds a national election next month. In a BBC interview, Clinton said the public needs to know.
I'm dumbfounded that this government won't release the report about Russian influence, because every person who votes in this country deserves to see that report before your election happens.
That election is set for December 12th. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government has said it needs more time to review the security implications of the report before it's released. A 17-year-old patient at Henry Ford Medical Center in Detroit wants to remain anonymous, but he also wants the world to know that he destroyed his own lungs just by vaping. Doctors describe it as a senseless, preventable death. And fortunately for their young patient, they were able to perform what's believed to be the first double lung transplant in the U.S. for a patient whose lungs were irreparably damaged from vaping. If you vape, the doctors are trying to get the message across to you. Dr. Hassan Neme is surgical director at Henry Ford Medical Center.
Essentially, the reason we wanted to bring this case to public attention because of the epidemic of e-cigarettes and vaping-induced lung injury that we are witnessing in the country.
Keep right on vaping if you want, the doctors say. You may be gambling your future on the availability of donor lungs. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter. I'm Bob Moon.
This is Bloomberg Best.
Bloomberg Best is about the insight and the context that we get from our guests.
It's a great way to catch up on some of the stories you might have missed on the Bloomberg.
Stories you're not going to find in any other news organization.
Bloomberg Best. Bloomberg's best stories of the day. Powered by 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries around the world.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Ed Baxter. On this edition of Bloomberg Best for Tuesday, November 12th, 2019, German car parts maker Continental reported a third-quarter loss. We hear from the company's CFO.
We will be profitable again. This loss in the third quarter was mainly due to impairments which we had to book.
And Kamal Sri Kumar tells investors to keep an eye on the unrest in Hong Kong.
If there is a negative outcome, you're waiting for the dust to settle and for the equity markets to come down before you go into it in a big way.
All this and more coming up in the next hour of Bloomberg Best.
First, let's check this hour's top business stories and the markets. I'm Doug Krisner from Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York. The markets failed to get much in the way of clarity from President Trump today on a partial trade deal between the U.S. and China. He told the Economic Club of New York a significant deal could happen soon, although during the Q&A session, Trump said if we don't make a deal, we'll raise tariffs substantially. He also renewed his assault on the Fed, saying the central bank was hurting the American economy by not copying other central banks and deploying negative interest rates. That sets us up for tomorrow's congressional testimony from Fed Chair Jay Powell. Here is Bloomberg Fed reporter Chris Condon.
Well, based on what we've heard from the Fed, from multiple policymakers, it really looks like they're on hold, and not just for a meeting or two, but probably well into 2020, if not all the way through until after the election.
The 10-year Treasury last quoted in New York at a yield of 1.92%. In the equity market, the Dow finished unchanged at 27,691. We had the S&P 500 rising 0.2%, and the Nasdaq Composite set a record at 84.86 with a gain of 0.3%, due in large part to a jump in shares of Facebook. They were up 2.6% after the company announced a new payment feature. JetBlue Airways fell 2.3%. The carrier is revamping its fare categories to give the company more tools to aggressively drive fares lower. We had CBS Corp falling 3.6% after reporting a drop in profit. The company invested more in original programming for its new streaming services, including a new deal for the Champions League soccer tournament. By the way, this is the final report for CBS before it merges with Viacom. Shares in Disney were up 1.4% as the company debuted its new streaming service, Disney+. There were a few technical glitches early in the day, and at the same time, a lot of buzz and excitement on social media. The new Star Wars series, Mandalorian, was trending. We had the drug maker AbbVie rising 0.9%. The company sold $30 billion in bonds to fund its purchase of Allergan. And the top U.S. milk producer, Dean Foods, has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I'm Doug Krisner, and that is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Investors are measuring the likelihood of a partial trade deal between America and China as President Donald Trump gives a little insight into negotiations, though he did say a deal could happen soon. For more on the economy and how trade is affecting markets, Bloomberg's Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz spoke with Kevin Cummins, economist at NatWest Markets.
I'd love to get your perspective on this sentiment shift that we've seen, which is somewhat dramatic. Now people being much more bullish rather than bearish. What data have we gotten to actually edify that view?
Yeah, well, there's certainly optimism growing over a reduction in uncertainty should the U.S. and China sign some sort of phase one trade agreement. In our own view here at NatWest Markets, we're a little bit reluctant to kind of think that everything's going to turn out all that positive in 2020 if there is some sort of agreement reached, which seems that things seem to be moving in that direction. And you know, as far as the overall economy, I think, you know, the data themselves that have been better, obviously, was the employment report at the start of the month. You know, the 128,000 jobs that were announced is nothing to necessarily write home about, but there were some positive signs of the trend is rising at a better pace than what was initially anticipated because there was a big upward revision to the prior months, and some of the other data within the report were fairly positive.
So, Kevin, are you of the opinion that we're really just talking about the consumer here in this economy? We know the consumer is 70% of the economy, but it seems like the other 30% is pretty weak, maybe even a manufacturing recession. Is the consumer strong enough to keep this economy growing?
Yeah, I mean, consumer spending certainly has been driving the growth in the economy lately. And as you mentioned, manufacturing, which is pretty much at the epicenter of the trade war, obviously we've seen business investment and exports slow down as well. So it's not only confined to the manufacturing sector, but, you know, the consumer, as you mentioned correctly, is definitely leading the charge with growth. But I think it's pretty obvious that the economy is in a slowing phase. And, you know, at the start of the year, we're up at 3%. In the last couple of quarters, we've been around 2%, which seems like a reasonable estimate for the fourth quarter as well. We don't have too much data that go directly into adding up GDP just yet, but later this week we will get retail sales, which you know, allow us to get some sense of at least spending heading into the all-important holiday shopping season.
A lot of people, including President Trump, seem to be increasingly conflating the performance of equity markets with the U.S. economy. And I guess, you know, even if we do have a slowing U.S. economy, can that support new record highs on the S&P?
I do think that the equity market is a good, at least, indicator of how things are currently. So it's more of a coincident indicator. There's very little economic data that actually do that good of a forward-looking gauge about growth. But I do think the equity market obviously is a very important one. So I definitely don't want to dismiss the positive tone in the equity market with regard to, you know, the future growth in the U.S. economy. But I do think that some of the earlier strength we've seen in the consumer is probably exaggerated, and you know, even just last week, your guys' measure, the Bloomberg Consumer Comfort Index, fell to a 7-month low. So, you know, it is only 1 week's worth of data, but I do think we're at we are starting to see a downshift in consumer spending, which kind of aligns with the slowdown that we've seen in payroll growth. Now, at the top, we did mention that the employment report was very strong, and all the upward revisions to earlier months were positive. But I do think we're starting to see some cracks in the consumer, not only consumer comfort index with the Bloomberg number coming down, but auto sales for October fell over 3.5%, or just about 3.5%, which is likely to hold back overall retail sales on Friday. These data clearly aren't weak enough for the Fed to reconsider any recent signal on rates, but in our view, the data don't necessarily support the high degree of confidence that the Fed and what Powell is likely to emphasize tomorrow with regard to the consumer and the outlook.
Kevin, what's your view of the European economy? Some people are suggesting that perhaps it's kind of bottoming out. Do you share that view?
Well, the data there with regard to like the purchasing manager surveys have been definitely less weak than they were. And obviously economies like Germany is really bearing a lot of the brunt from the China trade war. So, they are much more open and exposed to global situations than the U.S.
That was Kevin Cummins, economist at NatWest Markets. Coming up, Kamal Srikumar, Global Strategist President. This is Bloomberg.
1858. The first transatlantic cable brings news of Europe.
We have the US tariffs on European goods. Would you be standing ready to buy UK domestic stocks now?
It works for 3 weeks. Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
You are expecting an end of uncertainty.
It works every time.
What are you looking for in the event of a deal? There are a confluence